Hey everybody. So by now, most of us have probably heard about the Fox News commentator. I think his name is Raymond Arroyo. Um, I may have messed up the name, forgive me if I did, but who, in speaking about Trump and the new tennis shoes that he released, began to, and I can only assume that this is true, not an assumption. He made a very bold declaration in saying this, but stating, of course, that by Trump coming out with these new horrendous looking tennis shoes, if you ask me, was a great segue, if you will, into him trying to persuade black voters to vote for him, right? So he has these $400 sneakers designed and marketed, not according to Raymond Arroyo, for the sake of being able to pay off these astronomical bills, right, that he has from these fines that have been levied against him in these court cases, but instead it's a way to connect with black voters. That is the most absurd thing that I've ever heard, but I wonder how absurd it is to the general public. And this is why I say this. There for years has been a stigma placed on black people, and because this stigma and what's happening with the Trump campaign and these tennis shoes really feeds into one of the topics that I've spoken about and intend to speak about much more in the future, which is compensatory consumption. Some people call it conspicuous consumption. I am very much inclined to give my opinion about this man from Fox 26 who made these comments. The underlying implication, the unspoken implication, and what Mr. Arroyo and what the Trump campaign more than likely is saying here is that black folks spend their money on consumer goods. And because they spend their money on consumer goods, this is our way to connect with them. More importantly, they're saying not only that black folks spend their money on consumer goods, they're saying that it is the most important thing to them when it comes to their money. Not savings, not investment, not closing the wealth gap, but spending money on consumer goods, purportedly luxury goods, quote unquote. I don't know if I'd call these shoes luxury or luxurious, but whatever. They're $400. Think about what that is saying about black people as a whole. It feeds into every trope that the media has parlayed over the last 100 years concerning black people, even though there is no evidence that supports it. Yes, there's evidence that says that black people are the highest consumer base when it comes to the purchase of tennis shoes, but it doesn't say how much we're spending as it relates to our income. It doesn't say why we're buying the goods. There's no real data that states these people who make a certain amount of money in the black community are spending this money on shoes instead of spending this money on, let's just say, a pension plan or 401k, whatever. There's no research, or at least research that I've seen, that really gets to the nooks, or delves into the nooks and crannies, and really finds out what is happening with, as it relates to these people who are spending their money on these consumer products. Why does that matter? It matters because when you don't know something, you make assumptions. And because black people have always been assumed to be lazy, to be less encouraged or led to work, driven to work, it feeds into a stereotype, to a trope that we have dealt with probably most of our lives for most black people. And it has to stop. Here's the bottom line, y'all. I don't care if Keisha and Trina and whoever else goes out, Delmonico, whoever, Jerome, to buy a pair of Air Jordans for $300 every week. The money that they're spending on these consumer or luxury items, doesn't come close to the money that's needed, because here again, this is the underlying implication that nobody's saying. The money that these people are spending to buy these consumer goods don't even come close to what would be necessary to close the wealth gap, specifically as it relates to a comparison between Black and white persons. Not even close. Am I saying go out and spend your money instead of savings? No, but I'm saying that it's irrelevant when it comes to the conversation concerning the wealth gap. We are trillions of dollars away as it relates to Black persons versus white persons from closing that gap. Trillions. And the God's honest truth is that without some form of government intervention, it ain't gonna happen. So whether I or whether David or whomever else goes out and buys tennis shoes or puts that money in the bank, and doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. When we look at the bigger picture as it relates to closing the wealth gap, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. And you can't tell me that it's not. Because again, and if you do, your assumption is that they're spending that $400 on that shoes means unequivocally that they're not putting $400 in the bank to save also. Maybe they're going out and buying shoes once a year for all we know. We don't know because there's no data on it. We don't know if the person who lives next door to me went to buy shoes 3 times this year or once this year, right? We just know that he or she is a Black person, and according to the data, more than likely they bought a pair of shoes. What does that tell us? But instead of looking at it for its truth, the media for so long, politicians too, have taken this information and distorted it and used it against Black people as a way to say, you see, if y'all would just spend your money on things that you need, 401k plans, and putting it in the bank and saving it, y'all wouldn't have to be on welfare, and y'all wouldn't have these problems and be complaining all the time. That's really what this is saying, and it's a lie. These are all assumptions, these are all tropes, these are all stereotypes that are based on a lie. We've been misinformed, we've been bamboozled because it's a lie. Period. No amount of money saved in the pockets of Black people will help to really significantly close the wealth gap between Black and white people, period. We need government intervention. So, Raymond Arroyo from Fox 26 News, Trump, all the politicians out here, if you want to sway the Black vote, then start talking about issues that are relevant to Black people, that can help Black people close that gap. That's how you make real change. That is how equity begins to happen, right? That's how we begin to truly realize what it means to live in an equitous country. And I'm not saying that Black people haven't come a long way, because yes, we have, but we still have a long way to go, is my point. That's not a complaint. That's just the God's honest truth. That's what you guys don't want to say, but that's what absolutely needs to be said.